Hello, everyone. I just wanted to pop in and give you a little insight about chapter 4, which is culture and the developmental process. And I really wanted to focus on this concept of culture and temperament. All right. So when we talk about culture and temperament, we really need to talk about human development as a whole. So human development is a change in people based on different levels. The levels could be biological, physical, cognitive, emotional, and social. And oftentimes when we're talking about temperament, we are thinking about the development of early childhood, early development. Okay. Oftentimes when we talk about development in culture, we talk about developmental contextualism. And that is basically looking at development in a multitude of ways in multiple levels, and realizing that everything is kind of intertwined in an integrated system with one another. Okay, so culture and temperament. This is our first socialization aspects of the first day of life. Oftentimes we're talking about caregivers. Now, caregivers vary from culture to culture. In some more traditional aspects of family, caregiver is going to be considered mother. Mother is the one who is the birth mother in most cases, is the one who's providing sustenance through breastfeeding, is providing daily attachment, daily connections. Now, when we talk about it in a more cultural sense, or even traditional and non-traditional sense, caregivers can be a number of individuals. They could be adopted parents, they can be fathers, older brothers and sisters, and this varies from culture to culture. Sometimes older children are tasked with younger children in terms of watching and developing. But oftentimes when we talk about attachment, that close emotional bond that is developed out of the early connections, then we look at in terms of the culture and temperament, and looking at kind of the biological predispositions. So temperament is very heavily grounded in the biology of what we're talking about. And we learn about kind of how to react through our cultural practices. There is a lot of learning that's happening within culture. So what is temperament? Temperament is a biologically based style of interacting and responding to the environment that exists from birth. So we have an easy temperament, a difficult temperament, and what we call a slow to warm temperament. Now, these temperamental styles were developed out of Western concepts, but we see them pretty generalized across cultures. Easy, adaptable, mild. This would be the infant that wouldn't be fussy, would be easily undisturbed, passing from family member to family member. And in very collective cultures, community kinship connected cultures, we wouldn't see kind of the strange situation that Mary Ainsworth talks about in very collective cultural kinship, expanded network, family systems, the village kind of concept. Difficult temperament, these are infants who would be designated as colicky. I follow a couple of YouTubers who are living off the grid, and one of the YouTubers I follow, they just had a baby. They live out the country. I follow a lot of people traveling outside the country because that was something that I really enjoyed to do. I really enjoyed in my previous pre-world situation life. And this couple has a newborn. They came back to the United States and had natural childbirth, a doula and midwife assisted childbirth, which has become very popular amongst younger families these days, Western families these days. And they move back to the country of where they are residing. And the mother has been struggling a little bit because the infant is a little colicky, a little cranky, very hard to soothe. And they have been doing, I have to give them credit, been doing a very good job of managing in terms of their partnership with trying to soothe this infant under not so ideal conditions. So that's a difficult temperament that may occur. Difficult temperament babies tend to be the ones who are often mistreated, end up being, unfortunately, shaken babies, especially when you have parents or caregivers who don't have a lot of resources, have a lot of stressors, and don't have a lot of coping, which is difficult to cope with a newborn with all the resources. So if you have other environmental, everyday living issues that make living difficult, it will put infants even more at more risk. And then we have the slow to warm infant. This is the one who is the cautious. I always call this infant the one who's going to side eye you for a minute. Like, who are you? Why are you gonna come up close to me? Why are you in my face? And they kind of do a little grimacing before they realize, you must be okay. I'm gonna smile at you. That's a slow to warm infant. They need a little bit of time to transition in their environments, in their care, with their caregivers and the like. So if we take a look at these various infants, kind of the pensive, the open, bright-eyed, and the cry, colicky baby, all of them show kind of our depiction of the easy, difficult, and slow to warm. So temperaments are the precursors to personality. Think of the temperament as a biologically predisposed, a biologically set way of how the infant is going to interact with caregivers. Now, the interaction with caregivers is very important. A lot of individuals these days want to have children. A lot of individuals are struggling to have children. I have a friend who's going through an infertility issue. What we are seeing, what's happening lately with individuals who are trying to get pregnant, there's many different challenges to infertility. It's not just essentially based upon the age of the mother, even though in a lot of cases, I shouldn't say most, in quite a few cases, the age of the mother is one of those significant factors. The age of the father can be a significant factor. Even though men can have children at any age, the viability of sperm may be an issue as well. So wonderful, a couple who has been successful of having a baby, and we can talk about all different types of coupling. It doesn't necessarily mean it is a heteronormative kind of coupling, but we have a baby. However, the baby has arrived, viva surrogate, viva artificial insemination, natural methods. We think male and female, female, male, whatever the case may be, the baby is here. And now you have parents, caregivers, okay? Primary people who are going to take care of this very much loved infant. So what needs to happen in terms of this connection between temperament culture and parental caregiving, the family system? Well, we talk about the goodness of fit. And the goodness of fit is a degree in which a child's temperament style, easy, slow to warm, or difficult, matches expectations and values of the parent. Sometimes expectations have to be tempered by parents. Parents, you hear a lot of new mothers. I was listening to Jeannie Mai the other day on YouTube. She was talking to a popular podcaster who talks about sexuality, parenting, and couples. And Jeannie Mai said, nothing prepared her for postpartum. And I think a lot of new parents aren't prepared for postpartum when baby arrives, after baby arrives, in that short period of time, sometimes they refer to it as the fourth trimester, where parents are making the adjustments in terms of their goodness of fit. So could there be a mismatch? Yes, there could be a mismatch. And if the mismatch is not managed well, then we could have negative child outcomes. Wonder if we have a good fit. Then oftentimes if we have a good fit with parents' expectations and their values, then we see children having better outcomes. Now think about this. This makes sense. If I'm happy, I'm satisfied, things are going, I'm financially stable, I have a roof over my head, there's not too many difficulties, there's not too many challenges, then you probably will have a good fit in terms of the familiar lifestyle, okay? But if there's lots of challenges, if there's expectations of what motherhood and fatherhood, or motherhood and fatherhood, or parents or adoptive parents' idea of what having a baby is, there could be a mismatch. I had a friend who had a baby very late in life. They were close to 50, and they're a single parent, and they wanted to have a baby, and they were successful with having a baby. They tried, had infertility issues, and then ended up using a surrogate egg and artificial insemination of the surrogate egg. But they served as a surrogate. So they have the egg, the embryo, inserted, and they were successfully carrying the baby for gestation. And as a result, they're an older person, which is very common today in our society, especially Western society. We'll speak to the North America at this point in terms of parents, and we also see it in other countries, and we see it managed well in other countries. And I'm going to mention all those countries. First, let's start with North America, the United States. So using my friend as an example, she is in a position of being a single parent and having a small child, a preschooler, and having older parents who need healthcare, who need management. So she is known as the sandwich generation, where there's a person who is trying to caregive on two levels of the spectrum, caregive with small children and caregive with aging, ailing parents. We are seeing this quite often around the world as the population becomes older and older. What we have seen with the current world situation is that the current world situation targets an older generation. So we have seen a large number of older generation in our society succumb to disease states and death, unfortunately. For those who have not and are being managed by a middle generation, oftentimes this is more mitigated in when we have multiple levels of households, like we have here in Hawaii. That is what we see often common in Asian-based cultures, where we have multiple generations, 2 and 3 and 4 generations living together. There's various reasons for that. A lot of times people make the reasoning because of housing, the cost of housing in Hawaii, which is part of the reason. But the other part of the reason is a cultural idea of what family is and what multi-generational family connections are. So if that is the case, sometimes in those households that have been, this has been normalized in terms of the older generation, the middle generation, and the younger generation working in tandem and cooperation with one another, these kinds of stressors tend to be mitigated more effectively versus oftentimes here in the United States, we don't have multi-generational housing setups, especially in the mainland US. It's becoming a little bit more common, but it's not a common practice. The common practice is that you raise your children and your children go off and become independent individuals and live their own lives in their own spaces, etc. Now, there's things that have happened in the society. People have lost jobs, student loan debt, parents losing their health, that has caused a younger generation to become caretakers, a middle generation to become caretakers on both ends of the spectrum. So these are some of the kind of cultural factors and societal factors that can impact goodness of fit. So the other thing is personality, the parent's personality, their disposition, their behaviors. We have to consider those in what is considered family. We're gonna do an exercise, having an event upcoming where we're gonna have a watch party. And we're going to do some watch parties around communication and language. And essentially, we're going to watch some movies, and you're invited to come if your schedule permits. Each one of us will have a watch party schedule listed for your group. And essentially, I always think of the movies where there's multi-generational families, and there is the plot of the movie is some challenges between generations and how well they're managed. A lot of times, especially in the theater and movies, it's around emotionality, because emotional expression, emotional connections, how to express emotions, how children should be around adults, how adults should be around children is very culturally dictated. And also can be gender specific as well. And based upon traditional, non-traditional, indigenous, westernized, developed, how we kind of parlay these terms to describe kind of cultural communities. And that can have a true impact in terms of goodness of fit for parents as well. So what have cross-cultural studies showed about temperament? Different temperaments at birth make children of divergent cultures respond to the environment differently. It can evoke responses from caregivers and the environment. So environmental factors are just as important as biological factors. So here we have the nature versus nurture, how much of our genetics and how much of our environmental influences are important. And they produce fundamental differences in learning, social experiences, how we see our world, the world that we live in, and as we grow older. Like I said, I have loved travel. I've loved travel all my life. So luckily, I got to travel extensively in my younger life, in my early career as a professional. So I do miss travel, but there's not a whole lot of the world left for me to see. Unlike maybe yourselves, you may be itching to be scratching to get out into the world and travel and see the world. And I highly encourage that for young people to do that. And especially as the rules and regulations get clearer and clearer about how we will travel around the world and the safety around traveling around the world. I always say to my friends, I say, some people have been in this world situation and others have not. So people's perspective on what they can do and can't do is all different. This is kind of goes along with our theme in terms of how much culture and worldview influences how you operate in your environment. So with all that said, I remember a time when I visited New Zealand and visited one of my friends who had small children, a preteen and a early, I would say not preschool, but early primary school. And I went to visit, and as a kind of trade-off, I did babysitting for them. So it gave them an opportunity to do their couples things and things, and I would stay home with the kids and interact with the kids. I've known the children since they were born. We had met in Germany many years prior to that. And they moved away to New Zealand, and I moved to other parts of the world. And I was making my way back to the United States to take care of my parents for the remaining part of their lives. So before I got into that segment of my life, I did some extensive world travel, and I ended up in New Zealand. And so I spent my time there. I spent a month and a half with my friends and their children, and it was a lot of fun. The kids were a lot of fun, but there was some fundamental differences in terms of how kids were being viewed and being raised, going to school, all those things in the culture in New Zealand. One of the things that was most striking for me was the level of independence kids had. They were able to, go out and play. I came from places where it's like kids should be out playing and not monitored by adults. The fear factor. Part of that is because I'm African American, and the other part was I had lived in other places in the world where children playing alone by themselves, doing things independently, were not as seen. But I had gotten a little used to this because I was coming from Japan, and in Japan, small children as young as preschoolers will take themselves to school on subways and buses and walk by themselves with no problem. I remember the first time seeing that when I lived in Japan. I was shocked when I saw this little one get on the train with all these adults in this crowded train, and they got on the train, and as we went from stop to stop, more children got on. Their friends, they were going to various schools that were outside of their community or close to their house, and they would carry on with no difficulties. Not to say that there isn't danger for children in Japan, but the danger is extremely, extremely rare and extremely, extremely low. I never heard of any kind of adult mistreatment situation type of thing when I lived there. It exists everywhere, but it wasn't a common occurrence that we saw. And like I said, the first time I saw the kids with their little teeny flip phones, their kids' cell phones, and their backpacks and uniforms, it was just absolutely one of the cutest things I had seen. And I was absolutely fascinated and totally curious because it was small children without parents. Matter of fact, there's a couple of YouTube videos that are kind of the comedy show YouTube videos in Japan that parents will send their children to the local kind of 7-Eleven type store to pick up something, and they come back with something completely different, or something that they wanted, or something that was unrelated. So that is a common kind of comedy show in Japan. So I say all that for you to understand that temperament is a part of the culture that you're in, the culture that we learn about, the culture that is what is significant in relationship to what we do every day. And we parents, caregivers, reinforce cultural practices, teach cultural practices, and it becomes very evident early in life. And it is the building block of personality and what we may value later on as we become adults. Our first culture that we have is our family. It's the first culture we're embedded in, whether or not we like that family or not. Even when I said family, some of you are probably cringing at this video right now. It's like family, because some of us have families we love, some of us we have families we tolerate, some of us have families that we want to forget about. But that is the first culture that you're embedded in. So no matter how that plays out, that is one of the first cultures that you're embedded in. Some people develop different family systems due to the fact that they develop different family systems due to the fact that they want to expand, change, and thrive in a different way. Okay. The last thing I'm going to talk about is the dimensions of temperament. And dimensions of temperament are the following: the activity level, how active the child is, smiling and laughter, also their fear response to strange, unusual situations, distress to limitations, soothability, duration of orientating. All these kinds of factors are significant in looking at the dimensions of temperament. Distress to limitations. This is, I think some parents may fall short in this category because oftentimes this is what I've been seeing with my parent that I'm watching on the YouTube, is that they don't allow their infant to really have move through kind of their distress long enough. We're not saying to say that babies shouldn't be soothed and comforted. That's not the case. But babies also have to learn how to soothe themselves, and that's a part of soothability, and that connects to the distress to limitations. Certain things like especially infants who are learning to roll over, they may get a little distressed because they get a little stuck in the rolling over halfway, and part of the developmental milestones is learning how to cope and deal with those kinds of things. So that's soothability and distress and limitations are very important in terms of developing those skill sets and those coping mechanisms. You may have noticed in your own growth and development that your coping may not be as well as it should be in certain situations. You may not be even thinking about how that may be related to your early childhood experiences in goodness of fit and temperament that you had early on, and how that is reflected in the behaviors that you have today, and how you handle certain situations, and how you handle coping and stressors. So all this is a part of the connections in terms of temperament. Okay, that's all I want to address for today. Please continue watching the videos I post, reading the chapter, and reviewing the PowerPoint slides that I upload for you. Have a wonderful day and be safe out there.